I'm mad because everybody keeps talking quarterback, quarterback, quarterback. But at the NFL Combine, it was the defensive players who stole the show.
Welcome into College Football Today. He is the coach, Carl Reed. I'm Emily Proud. Thank you for being with us. We have a very exciting show on hand. So if you like this program, be sure to smash that like button. Also, come join us in the chat. Already hopping today. People are excited about our special guest. I'll introduce him in just seconds. But as a reminder, to be a part of the chat, you have to subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. So go ahead and do that. And without further ado, let me introduce our special guest today. It is Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz. He is joining us in just seconds here. But first, let me tell you a bit about him. You can see his resume here. He's been at the helm since 2020, has not missed a bowl game since becoming head coach. His previous stops include App State. He was also on Auburn's staff for their 2010 national champ season. So let's welcome in the coach to our program here. How you doing today? Thanks for joining us, Coach.
I'm doing really good. It's about 70 and sunny in Columbia, Missouri. And so anytime you get the sunshine in Columbia, had a chance to go take a walk outside. 3 days of spring practice, man. So far, so good. No injuries, no complaints at all.
I love it. We love to hear it. Not to top you, but it is 79 and sunny here in Nashville. But we'll all appreciate the good weather.
Y'all had storms over the weekend. We didn't have none of those storms either. So, I mean, we didn't have to get under our desk or anything for tornado drills. So we'll take our 71.
I did have to call a fence repairman because our fence fell down due to those high winds. So I feel you officially win that competition. Speaking of competition, though, let's talk about spring ball. You got a bit of a quarterback competition going. It seems like it's a three-man race at this point. What do you like about the guys that you have in that room?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for us right now is it's really a competition within amongst themselves. They're really just working to be the best players that they can be. You know, Brady's missing all of spring because he's got recovering from surgery. You know, Sam's actually not quite 100% because of a baseball injury he suffered while throwing on the mound. So really, right now, Jake Garcia and Dylan Leibel are taking all the reps, and there's not that pressure on them to perform. And I think anytime you're seeing that, these guys are able to grasp the concepts, really try to learn what Kirby's asking them to do from a schematic standpoint, and they're really having some good success. So it's been fun to watch. Like I said, there's not that pressure to perform. I think we'll start getting into more pressure situations as we increase the situations, whether it's 2-minute drives, red zone. Saturday we'll have a big scrimmage, and then the following Saturday we'll have our spring game. So we'll amp up the pressure, but right now it's really just about them focusing on being the best version of themselves.
Coach, when you bring in a new offensive coordinator like Kirby Moore, there's a guy like Garcia who's going to get an opportunity to work with him all spring, have an advantage over the guys who are not participating in spring practice, either the injury or baseball? Or do those guys, because they were in the system a year ago, will they still be in a steady situation?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's kind of both, right, Carl? Because these guys have familiarity with understanding the speed of the game and the players that they've been with, and they're sitting in the meetings understanding the terminology, and they've all played. So it's just a matter of saying same as, like, okay, we called it this last year, or we called it, this at a previous school. Okay, so I've had those reps. I just got to get used to it, the players that are in the scheme right now. So I think they'll all be fine. One of the things we've been able to do with Sam is, even though he's not 100% throwing the football, we've still been able to get out there and during our tempo periods, let him go run the tempo periods. He's not really throwing the RPOs, but he's still out there executing the calls and getting lined up and making pre-snap decisions, which for the quarterback position is as important as anything.
Carl, that was a great question. I love how you're asking these, well thought out questions and talking to Coach Drink. Like, you guys don't have this relationship, like you guys don't know each other. So explain to everybody just the relationship you have with Coach Drink here.
Well, Coach Drink's a great friend of mine. I used to be a high school coach in the city of St. Louis, and obviously he's the head coach at the University of Missouri. I've known him, for quite a bit. and I want to see him succeed quite a bit, Emily. I know a lot of the kids on the roster, and I know at the University of Missouri, the fans are very passionate about football. They want to see guys have success. Some great players from St. Louis there on the roster as well, Emily. And I think that I was at, and Drink will know this spot, I was at a local spot in St. Louis on last Friday called Thompson's, okay? And that's where all of the big time guys in St. Louis go there every Friday, and they say this is the year for the Tigers. They saying that the Missouri Tigers are going to start off 5-0, and then LSU is going to come in for a home game at the University of Missouri, and it's going to be rocking in Columbia, and the Missouri Tigers are going to beat LSU. That's what the streets are saying in St. Louis, Drink. So you know the kind of pressure it is when the guys from St. Louis have those kind of expectations.
Yeah, you don't believe everything that you hear down at Thompson's Fish in East St. Louis. I learned that a long time ago. But, here's the thing. We do have an opportunity, but, I mean, we're going to play the Big 12 defending champs. But we get them at Faurot Field, which is exciting for us. We're playing a Middle Tennessee team that's plenty capable. Just ask Jake Garcia. He faced him at Miami. So I think we're getting the cart in front of the horse. I think there's nothing settled in football. That's why you play the game. And so obviously we're going to have a lot of tremendous challenges. But with all that being said, there is optimism within our program, within our team. We return 8 starters on the defensive side of the ball. We were able to retain some really talented players from they had an opportunity to go to the NFL, or they could come back and play another year of college football. And whether you're talking about Tyron Hopper or Darius Robinson, Chad Bailey, J.C. Carlisle, Ennis Rakestraw, Chris Abrams-Drain, Joseph Charleston, those guys are really good, solid football players that will have a chance to play in the NFL and are choosing to come back to improve. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you've got Javon Foster, you have Luther Burden, we have a recruit Theo Weiss, Stannis Jackson, Makai Miller, Armand Mimbu. And then, obviously we've got Brady Cook coming back with a competition with Sam Horn and Jake Garcia. So there's a lot of things to be excited about. You're only as good as your specialist, right? And so we've got Riley Williams, a transfer punter from Australia. You've got the thicker kicker, Harrison Nevis. So there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on us. We had a really good recruiting class the previous 2 years, and those guys are ready to contribute, not only on the field, but also in special teams to create the quality depth that you have to have in order to be successful in our league. So, we need to put it together. We need to have a more than just, barely qualifying for a bowl season. We need to really take that next step as a program. And, last year we had some really good battles that didn't come our way. So, we've got to find that what is that next thing that we need to do to get over the top. One of the things in our self-evaluation was giving up play calling and let Kirby come in and really dictate, which way we're going offensively moving forward, and me take a broader approach to the overall program. Obviously that had a lot of success for us last year with Coach Baker on the defensive side of the ball. And so taking that same approach on the offensive side of the ball and look to see where those dividends come in at.
Coach, now you mentioned a bunch of guys that had an opportunity to move on, but they decided to stay. Guys like Tyron Harper, guys like Chris Abrams-Drain. Those guys had legitimate NFL draft grades. I know that I thought that they were going to declare from the draft from where I was sitting, and probably a couple other people. You also had a lot of rumors swirling around that Luther Burden was considering going in the transfer portal. The fact that those guys stayed, what did that have to say about the culture that you guys built, that guys that had options to leave and go on to play professionally or maybe go to other big-time programs, they did decide to stay in Columbia. So what does that say about the culture that you've built there and the kind of locker room that you guys have?
Yeah, I think it's a culture of trust, that they trust that they're improving, right? Like players want to be coached and players want to improve, because really that's your opportunity. No matter how good you are in college football, you know you're always going to have to improve in order to achieve your dreams, which are playing in the NFL. And so as long as guys feel like they're improving, they're inclined to stay and continue to buy into what everybody would call the process. And so I think you're seeing that. Really, for the first time since I've been here, we've been able to really retain players and offer them an opportunity to really improve their stock, for the NFL. And I think that's been a huge thing for us to be able to do that. And like you said, our locker room, I think the Mizzou brotherhood is really taking hold. I think these guys enjoy playing with each other. I think they enjoy being in Columbia, Missouri. I think they enjoy, we've had great student section. Our basketball team is unbelievable right now. It's good to be a Tiger. It's good to be a student athlete at the University of Missouri. And there's all kinds of NIL opportunities that they're been able to engage in. There's opportunities for them to win, but more importantly, there's opportunities for them to continue to grow as football players to improve their value.
Yeah, and along those lines, I love what your defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, said. He was pleasantly surprised by the amount of guys returning on defense. ESPN's Bill Connolly has you as the number 10 team in the country in terms of returning talent. 8 of the top 11 players on defense in terms of returning snaps are back. How much does that help you, and how does that change the expectations that you have for the fall when you have that continuity? You don't have to start fresh like a lot of college football programs are having to do this spring.
Yeah, I think iron sharpens iron, right? It's the quote. So, whenever you have that much talent returning, the offense has to raise their level of play to have any type of success, right? And then on the defensive side of the ball, you got guys, no matter where you're at, there's players on our team that want to contribute and they want to play and they want to beat out the guy in front of them. And I'm going to tell you right now, Tristan Newsome, a junior college linebacker, is playing absolutely like a wild man at that linebacker position. And he plans on competing. Chuck Hicks, who, missed all last season because of injury, is not going to sit, just take it lightly that he's going to be the 2. He's coming for a job. And so when you see that competition, it really just elevates your level of play in really all aspects of the program. And that's how you get better. Whether it was Carl's team at DeSmet or Lutheran North, wherever he's been, he can tell you the reason why he won was because he had a lot of talent, but he had a lot of competition. And that's what we're trying to create. And we've been able to do that on the defensive and on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you're looking, we brought in a transfer, Marcellus Johnson, at the right tackle position. But, man, he's having to compete every day with Val Erickson and Armand, who aren't just going to say, well, okay, I'm just going to wait another year. I mean, they want to play right now. And so that's been a lot of fun to see. Darius Robinson, one of the really good interior defensive linemen in the SEC. They don't make a lot of guys that are 6'5", 300 pounds that look like a Greek god, and he does. And he's got a chance. He could have gone to the draft and decided, no, he's going to come back and really work to elevate his stock. But, Josh Landry, Christian Williams, Jaden Jernigan, Realist George, Marquise Graciel, they all want to play too. And they understand that we're going to play the best player, and everybody's got to earn their right to play.
Coach, you've been an offensive guy your entire career, and you said a lot, and we've had this conversation a lot amongst ourselves, that if you were going to bring in an OC, it had to be the right guy. It had to be somebody you felt could do a job that was even better than the job that you have done in your career. Why was Kirby Moore that guy for you at the offensive coordinator position?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things, right? Like, you got to have somebody who understands offense the way I think about it, who really wants to be multidimensional in how they approach it. We believe in a game plan specific style of offense, and so you want somebody who kind of has that background and is not so dogmatic in their system that they're not willing to take outside ideas. And then I think the other thing is, you want somebody who wants to attack the game the way you see it. And so one of the things that as I was studying tape was, going back and watching Fresno, when Jake Haener got hurt, how did he design game plans? How did he give himself a chance to win? How did he approach the game when he was playing against Oregon State or USC or even Washington State? What was his approach? Because you're not always going to be the most talented team, but yet he was still able to create problems for the defense through shifts, motions. He still had an identity of what they were trying to accomplish on the offensive side of the ball that was clear to see, but he always gave his team a chance to win. And I think about the University of Missouri and what we're trying to accomplish. Yes, we're more talented than we've been, but we're going to go into some games where we're going to have to create advantages through scheme. We're going to have to create advantages through consistent confusion to the defense and what we're doing through shifts and motions, and we're going to have to build on a scheme. And those are things that he's done, and I think he does a really good job of. And so it was easy just to say, okay, this is a guy that will also, say, hey, okay, we see that Coach has some ideas and already has some things in place that I can learn from, that I can build to, but these are some things that I can add to also.
What does handing off those play calling duties allow you more time to prioritize now?
Well, the biggest thing is to do a show like this. In the past I would have had to be today, but now I can get out and really, I'm kind of joking, but kind of not, right? Like the job of the head coach is to sell the program, and whether I'm on a big time show like College Football Today, or whether or not I'm doing the radio or talking to boosters, whatever, it's all part of the recruiting process and getting players to want to come be a part of what we're doing, or getting boosters to join in on what the Mizzou Tigers are trying to do. And the more people we have in our corner, the better. And so this just gives me the ability to go out and really try to do that. And, college football's changed a lot in the last 18 months, whether it's the transfer portal or NIL. I mean, the job of the head coach has changed. And so I'm having to embrace that. We have a sign in our team room that says, embrace your role, put the team first. Me personally, I'd love to just keep calling plays and design an offense, but that's not what the job that our team needed. And so I needed to embrace my role as the head coach and put the team first and let somebody else design and come up with plans.
I love it. Carl and I have both talked about it. We do really like the Kirby Moore hire. We like it even more now, though, to hear that it means that you get to be on our show and we get to talk to you a little bit more. You mentioned anytime. Okay, I'll hold you to that. We'll finish this for now, and then we'll get to your future episodes. But first off, you mentioned all the changes that are happening in the college football world. How about this one? The NCAA proposing some in-game changes, all of it, of course, to try to speed up the game. It's definitely those last two that I think are getting a lot of run, and that's the clock running after first downs, except inside of 2 minutes, and then the clock running on incompletions once the ball is stopped. So, Coach, and as you build and you game plan in game, what do these changes do in terms of affecting the way that you coach a game?
Well, I think this is an interesting thing that has occurred. I would also, I'd kind of like to hear what Carl's take on it is. The design of a team that is maybe not as good as the opponent they're going to is to shorten the game, because in the shorter amount of game, every game starts at 0-0. So, I'm wondering, the teams that have a superior talent advantage, is this a way for teams that with a lesser talent advantage can try to manufacture holding the ball, making time of possession more valuable for them? And then I think the second question we got to ask ourselves is, how come we can't do in-game commercials like they do in the NFL, which would have reduced some of the playing time also? If we're talking about length of the game, but I digress a little bit on that. But, it'll be interesting to see. I don't necessarily know if it'll change a whole lot during the course of the game. I think people will look up and all of a sudden, I know when I would play Boston College or we played Army in the bowl game, you knew that those teams were going to hold on to the football and your possessions were going to be limited in a manner that really affected how you called the game, whether it was fourth downs and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see some of these tempo teams that are quick to get back to the line of scrimmage with the clock moving all the time, how much that reduces their possessions. because at the end of the day, they're trying to get the most possessions possible because they believe their points per possession is what really wins. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the kind of things that I look at it about.
It would definitely take possessions away from the tempo team. One thing, Drink, when I look at the rules changes, I think the college football game is as good as it's ever been. The ratings have been high. We're selling out stadiums every week. I think the fan experience is a really good thing. I don't like the idea of trying to shorten the game because I think that I'm an old school guy, maybe. I think it tears away at the integrity of the game when you start running the clock on incomplete passes. That's not the way that football has been played at any level. So I'm going to probably stick to a real old school train of thought on that. You bring up a great point when you say, why can't we have commercials during the flow of the game like the National Football League? Mm-hmm. I think that that's something to be considered, but from a rules change and shortening the game, I think that fans also are cheating themselves if they watch college football on TV every weekend. Go out, go to a stadium, enjoy the game, really understand and get involved with the pageantry, the tailgating, seeing the team walk down to the stadium. It's a beautiful experience to go to, and I think that if more people understood what college football was really about by going on campus, by watching games and supporting these young men, that they would even have a better feel for college football and for the way that things are going. But from the proposed rule changes, I think that, man, I think it's really tough when you start messing with the clock, messing with the scheme. You know, you could end up playing a team like Army or Navy, and, man, that game be over in the blink of the eye, man. You done touched the ball 5 times, and your job is on the line, man. That's a wild situation to be in, you know. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely, because the reality of it is, like, the things that are extenuating the clock are the multiple video reviews, right? Like, you know, we will watch. I mean, they're not inconsequential, but inconsequential plays, inbounds, out of bounds. Did he have a foot down? You know, reviews like that let the on-field decision stand, and unless it's a scoring play, then let's keep going. The other thing is, like, the clock running after an incomplete pass is going to be the biggest one. You know, the clock running after a earned first down. If you really watch it, our officials, I would say, within 5 seconds of a ball out of bounds or a ball after a first down, they're winding the clock. The 40-second clock is going, and the game clock is rolling too. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a bigger change, but what will be is the clock running after an incompletion. Because, again, if you look at you know, the guys who have really changed the game of football, like Mike Leach, one of the things that them throwing the football did was give them an opportunity for more explosive plays, while also lengthening the game. And the longer the game goes, when maybe you're not as talented as the opponent, you know, does that help you? I don't know. There's going to be all kinds of questions that we'll all have to figure this out together, but it will change, you know, some of the philosophies as you get moving.
A lot of great in-depth football conversation there. If you are enjoying this video, please hit that like button. We got a lot of people watching, like to get the like to viewership ratio up just a little bit. I love Carl talking about this because I know that you just want to run the ball. So I don't know when it comes to clock management. What?
Wing T. Carl, wing T guy.
Huge wing T guy, of course. But you know that this is not the only change that we're seeing with college football. I mean, we could talk to you all day about everything, but I do have to ask you about NIL because every time that we go to that wide shot, I see a bag of chips in the corner there. Some Luther Burden chips. So my first question, the big question, how do they taste?
Those are tremendous.
Really?
I mean, they really are. They're a little bit spicier than you kind of give them credit for, but you know, in fact, we can probably, I'll have to see if Luther has any extra bags laying around because that's, you know, I can't just give those away. But you know, Crud Carl could probably pick up some at Thompson's. Mm-hmm. And bring them back.
Do they sell them at Thompson's?
They have them at Thompson's.
But what an awesome thing, right? Like, you know, here's the deal. They're talking about a 12-team playoff is going to generate $1 billion of revenue, okay? And to think that these players don't deserve any of it is archaic thinking. It's exactly what it is. The money has boomed in the last 15 to 20 years through TV revenue and TV dollars. And so absolutely these players deserve an opportunity to generate to generate value for themselves, to receive some benefit for what they're doing. What that benefit is, what that number is, I don't know. I mean, that's obviously a conversation that's well past my pay grade. But it's a great thing for somebody like Luther Burden, who's from St. Louis, to have an opportunity to partner with the St. Louis company, create value for himself, have something that his parents can be, very familiar with. And it's not just him, right? It's all kinds of players on our football team. Cody Schroeder is marketing a local gym out of St. Louis, who's also a great story. I know Brady Cook is doing some really good things out of the city of St. Louis. We've got a lot of our players who are helping with some non-profits through the Every True Tiger Foundation Collective. There's a great opportunity for these guys to be able to play for their home state, to build their value, build their brand, and hopefully when football's over, to be able to tap back into those connections and business partnerships to help them, be a positive contributor to society, help them be able to gain financially for their contributions to Mizzou football.
When you talked about NIL just now with several of the players, not just Luther, but Cody and Brady Cook as well, how significant was staying at home for some of those local guys and adding to their NIL value? Sometimes what people don't understand is when you are away from your market, your value could possibly go down. But it seems like some of the local guys have done tremendous things from an NIL value standpoint. How important has that been with you in recruiting?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Carl. I mean, when you talk about these Ripley Red Hots, right? I mean, there may be two other players in the entire college football world that have their own food product. But when you look at what Luther's been able to generate, it's a partner with St. Louis and Old Vienna because of their support for Missouri, right? If Luther was at any other university, I'm not sure that would make sense for those chips to be all throughout the state in their local schnook stores or whatever partnerships we might have, whether it's local gas stations, break time, whatever, that he's been able to create partnerships for them. Same thing with Cody Schroeder. Like, if Cody Schroeder is at another state or another institution, what value do these local fans have in partnering with both of those? I think it's one of the things that makes it so unique. And there's other people that have partnered with car dealerships. It's their name recognition, their value that they have with the brand because it's joined with Mizzou. And when you play at the University of Missouri, you play for the entire state of Missouri, and we have 6 million fans, and everybody can be a fan of the Cardinals. They can be a fan of the Chiefs, the Royals, the Blues, MLS, City St. Louis, or Sporting KC. But at the end of the day, we're all Tigers, and we all support the Missouri Tigers. And I think that partnership has allowed these NIL opportunities to really boom for them.
Yeah, when it comes to NIL, obviously there's a large effect on the transfer portal. And I think when people talk about college football nowadays, a lot of it's jumping to saying that it's the wild, wild west and things are out of control and thousands of players are moving around. In your estimation, I mean, it is kind of chaotic, and it has definitely boomed since NIL and since the portal was introduced. But from what you see, is there, or what are some changes that need to be made to kind of slow down that movement in the transfer portal?
It's so hard to say, right? Because anything you say turns out to be controversial, right? You're either not pro player, or you're just trying to protect your own interest. And I think that's the whole issue, is like, no matter what the suggestions are, it's from a slanted view that might help Mizzou, or might help or is it pro player or whatever. I just understand. Right now, we have a situation where you have two basic open free agency periods. And there's no real salary cap. There's no real, the value is dictated by the market, and the market's ever changing. And so it's hard to know what your roster is going to be and how you build your roster. And at the end of the day, that is going to affect college football and the product that we place out there. I do agree with Carl. I think the game is very good right now, but scoring in our college football and in the NFL was down last year. And I think that's a direct result of the lack of cohesion and continuity on both sides of the ball because of the transfer portal on offense. And so I think you got to take a look at that. You know, I do think too that adversity is one of the best teachers in life. And no matter what happens, when you step foot on campus, when you're going from high school to college, you're going to face some sort of adversity. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe saying, hey, there's a certain amount of time period that you have to be on a campus before it's open transfer. And maybe there are ways out of it with coaching changes and all that, but it's really hard to say that, you know, I've seen in the last 2 weeks, there's players who signed in December, have been on campus, and they've already announced that they're transferring. And that to me is really a challenge in college football.
Coach, when you talk transfer portal, we can always take this conversation anywhere. We can go to some guys that it's been very successful for. We can go into some of the nightmares of guys who haven't found schools. But one thing that was very interesting to me, a success story, and you've mentioned this guy's name a couple times, Cody Schroeder, a guy that coming out of high school basically had an offer from one Division II school, Truman State. He led Division II in rushing, jumped in the portal. You took him as a walk-on. He ended up starting several games. How has the portal been for a guy like Cody Schroeder, and what has his story meant to your program and his production as a member of the Missouri Tiger football team?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Carl. There's been nightmare scenarios, and then there's unbelievable stories that are kind of like Rudy, but this is a better version. I mean, obviously Cody led all of Division II last year, 2 years ago in rushing, and always had a dream to play at the University of Missouri. And you know, when he decided he was going to walk on here, I mean, we thought, okay, great, we'll have another guy who can walk on, and maybe he can earn a spot on special teams. But through consistency of action, work ethic, you know, he earned the opportunity to be our starter and earned a scholarship, and is really a great representation of our university. And so that's awesome. In fact, he was such an inspiration. We've had another one. Ben Stratman from Missouri S&T is doing the same thing. It was his 7th year. He led, I know he led his conference, but I think he might have led Division II in sacks, and has chosen to come try to play at the University of Missouri also to live out his dream. So I do think there is an opportunity for freedom of choice and freedom for a player to live out their dream through the transfer portal. But there's also, I mean, there's all aspects of it. And so I'm not here to understand the entire answer. I think the biggest challenge we have, though, in college football is, again, we've created a sport that is $1 billion. I mean, we're talking about the Big Ten is splitting $1 billion. The SEC is splitting $800 million or something like that. The 12-team playoffs a $1 billion enterprise. But we're considering rules that encompass the entire NCAA. No other sports business does that. The NBA, when it creates the rules for the NBA, doesn't also consider NHL or MLB or the NFL in order to make their rules. Yet when I sit in SEC head coaches meetings and we talk about the struggles that we have, some of the reasons that we can't make or institute rules that would help us is, well, how's that going to affect basketball, or how is that going to affect softball or baseball? You know, there's no other sports that does that. So that's some of the challenges that we're facing in trying to come up with a comprehensive system that'll help govern this. The reality of it is, the reason why Major League Baseball and the NBA had to go to a salary cap and had to change their rules was because the fandom got tired of LA and the Lakers and the Celtics always playing. Or the Yankees and the Dodgers always playing for the championship, because they had the most money, they had the most fan support, they were able to get the best players. And that's an avenue that we're proceeding down unless we put some guardrails in place that give everybody a chance to play by the same rules.
All right, we've touched on a lot of the buzzy topics of the offseason, like rule changes, portal, NIL. How about conference realignment? Let's throw that one in there. You got 2 new schools joining next season, and look at this. The proposed permanent opponents for your Missouri Tigers look like this: Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. What are your thoughts on these 3 potential permanent opponents?
Well, I don't have nearly as much clout as Coach Saban, so I'm not making any comments on the record. Like I know for sure if that's the three proposed teams or not, and I'm not going to complain or say excited one way or the other. I just know that we're in a situation where we're going to have to figure out a way to play 9 games. My biggest challenge is that we figure out this sooner rather than later, because what people are not talking about is that if you have 5 away games in the SEC, you better make sure that your non-conference schedule doesn't have 2 away games, or you're going to be looking at a season where you have 7 away games, right, and just 5 home games in the SEC. And if you're not careful, and you have one of those permanent crossover games like Clemson plays South Carolina and Florida State plays Florida, every year that game's alternating. So how do you make sure that schedule matches up so you're not 6 home, 6 away? So there's a lot of complexities to this system and what we're trying to accomplish. And the sooner we can provide clarity, it's not going to be perfect for everybody. Nothing is. All right. And so we can just throw that out the window. Like, well, I don't like these opponents or I don't like those opponents. Well, when you play a 9-game schedule, you're not going to like everybody you have to play. I mean, it's not possible for everybody in that room to walk out of there and say, well, that's perfect for us. That's just not how it's going to be. So, you hopefully they do the best they can, and I know this, it's still going to be the best conference in college football, and it's still going to be really challenging, and Mizzou better really recruit at a high level, and Carl better help me in St. Louis if I'm going to have any.
The pressure's on, Carl.
Coach, what would be the best way for the SEC to handle these 3 permanent opponents, and how do you manage the not knowing of it at this point? You just talked about if you don't know, you could possibly schedule 2 away games, and that can put you in a bad situation. How do you manage the not knowing?
Well, here's the thing. I'm a proponent of the 9-game schedule. I think when you look at the SEC and competing in this league, and especially at a place like Mizzou, the more continuity, the more people that you have to compare yourself against, the more you can raise up to the challenge. So whatever the 3 teams that we play, that's who I'm going to compare ourselves to continually, right? And that gives us a chance for success. If you're playing 1 permanent and 7 teams are constantly rotating on and off your schedule, it's going to be hard to try to create any type of continuity of this is my competition. And then the other thing is, I've been fortunate. I coached at Auburn. I can't imagine if I'm at Auburn and I don't play in the Old South's in the South's oldest rivalry game of Georgia. I also can't believe that I don't play Auburn every year. I can't believe if you're Alabama, you don't play Tennessee and Auburn every year. I can't believe if you're at Texas A&M, you don't play OU and Texas every year. LSU, I don't know how you don't play Alabama. I don't know how you don't play some of these rivalry games that are consistent with what the SEC has always been. There's a certain nostalgia that belongs in our league that you have to maintain. And everybody can talk about, oh, well, we got to get all the schools to all the different campuses. Well, I know what you better do in the SEC. You better play some of these games that are the reason why people in the South hold on to traditions and the pageantry of college football. We better maintain those. And that's why I'm a proponent of the 9-game, 3 permanent schedules, because you might get some tougher games. I get it, but you also are maintaining what's best for college football in a day and age where we're throwing all the rules out and doing all that stuff. I mean, I still tune in when the Cowboys play the Commanders, or the Cowboys play the Eagles, or the Cowboys play the Giants, because those games mean something in the NFC East. That's the same thing that you got to have in the SEC. If you lose those games, I mean, I can't speak for other schools, but I don't know that Mizzou and some of these other schools have strong, ties to our fan base that are going to really attract audiences. I do know us playing Arkansas. I do know us playing Oklahoma, reviving some of that Big 12 rivalry. I think that's good for the state of Missouri. I know us in Oklahoma fight all the time in Kansas City for recruits. So I think us getting a chance to play on the field would be good. So I think that's a positive. And I think, again, the more consistency in teams that we play on a yearly basis helps you kind of see where you're at in the conference.
Yeah, that eight-game format is tough to get behind with the one permanent opponent, but what a good problem to have, though, is so many rivalries and so much interest and trying to figure out where you go from there. Based on what some other conferences are dealing with, this is a blessing, right?
Well, let me ask y'all, could y'all imagine a year where Auburn doesn't play Alabama, or Georgia doesn't play Auburn, or Alabama doesn't play Tennessee?
Yeah, I don't think that's good for college football.
Or Florida doesn't play Georgia?
Yeah. I don't think that.
Like that, is that good for the SEC? I mean, is that good for the SEC?
I don't think it's good for the SEC. I don't think it's good for college football. And I think when kids get recruited by those schools, they want to play in those kind of games. You know, so I think that that's something that has to be looked at. But when we started doing the super conferences, and when we got so many teams now in the SEC, so many teams in the Big Ten, when you talk about UCLA and USC coming all the way out to the Big Ten, we knew we were going to lose a little of that. But I do think that we have to do as much as possible to keep some of those rivalries that makes college football really, really special. We have to keep it as consistent as possible. I think you're hurting some fan bases and some schools if you get rid of. Can you imagine no Iron Bowl? You know, like that would be tough.
No.
Well, hey, they say, well, but it's going to happen every 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is the Olympics. How's that worked out for the Olympics?
No, I mean, we talked about the differences. Yeah, exactly. No, we talked about the differences with college football and, you know, other professional sports. I would say the first one is tradition and rivalries and those legacies. I mean, that's what makes it so special. Think about the fans of the Bedlam rivalry, having to say goodbye to that potentially with Oklahoma going to the SEC. So there's a lot, unfortunately, that you don't think about when you talk about conference realignment and these TV deals and everything that's going down is you're missing some of that excitement and tradition. But definitely still a good time for the sport. That's something that we talked about. And we're getting a lot of YouTube comments here, and people have some questions for you. I guess this isn't really a question, but Jason says that your office has evil villain layer vibes. Is that kind of the vibe that you were going for when you were constructing your office, Coach?
I think it's just the bad lighting.
It's bad lighting. Well,
I think it's because the light on my face, like sometimes it goes in and out.
Yeah.
So I don't know that, but yeah, I don't. I mean, I got my 4-year-old and 3-year-old are in here, 2-year-old are in here coloring. So I don't. Definitely not an evil villain vibe.
Definitely not evil. We do have a quick question though from Stuart. Who's getting reps at punt and kick returners this spring?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one of those things that we know we need to improve on. I think somebody that y'all would be well. Obviously, we've got Danis Jackson came in, Luther Burden, Nate Pete, J.C. Carlisle, Chris Abrams-Drain, but Marvin Burks. We put Marvin Burks back there for the kickoff return. He did it in high school. He's a young man who's come in, has really flashed in these first 3 days of practice. Been very impressed with what he's brought. From at a safety position. He's a guy that's got a real opportunity to come in and help us play. Mookie Cooper gets return reps. Tavares Jones is getting return reps. But that's a phase of the game that we've got to be much better in.
All right. Finishing with some special teams talk. Coach, you have been more than generous with your time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate y'all's time, and thank you for letting me have an opportunity to spread the word about Mizzou football. And I don't think I said anything too controversial, which has been good for me. I didn't make the Tennessee fans mad, which is a first.
Now she's a Tennessee grad.
They're still probably mad, so it's fine.
Yeah, so that's good. But next time I have it on, there'll be more things happening in college football. So I'm sure I can say something stupid.
Well, Drink, she is the #1 Tennessee fan in the world. She is all Tennessee.
I'm sorry. No, I was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee, so it's tough. Please don't hold it against me.
She really wanted Josh Heupel today. I had to fight to bring you on because she wanted Josh Heupel, but I said we're bringing on Drink, and I'm gonna put my foot down.
See, these are things we establish at the end of the interview, so you don't hold it against me. But try not to. But thank you again. Hope to have you on maybe later in the spring or summer. Plenty of time to talk ball.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Come back in. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a good one.
All right, Coach.
All right, well, in the midst of spring practice, you also have the NFL Combine wrapping up in Indy this weekend. You can check out a really great full recap of winners and losers from the week on 247sports.com. But the late kicks Josh Pate, who was in Indianapolis, gives us his biggest takeaways from the Combine.
I think you got to begin every NFL Combine conversation at quarterback, and we've got four that have seemingly separated themselves. You got Stroud, you got Young. But Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, a lot of the focus on those guys this week is so reminiscent of what we spent a lot of time back in the summer of 2022 talking about on Late Kick and every other college football program out there that previews a season. Because stop me where you've heard this before. Anthony Richardson is an athletic specimen, total alien. His physical attributes are off the charts. He's doing things on the practice field that no one's ever seen done before. It sounds a lot like what we heard come out of Gainesville last year. Then we got to the season, and he had 7 games under 200 yards passing, and he had 9 games under 60% completion percentage. I'm not saying he's going to be a bust. I'm just simply saying anyone who was taken off guard with that guy being an athletic freak of nature just wasn't paying attention, which happens every year around this time. You got some folks who claim that they watch college football, then you find out really what they watched is SportsCenter highlights, and they haven't really watched full games. And if they even have, they weren't watching it from an analytical standpoint. They were at a bar somewhere, and it's on the TV, but they really aren't focused. And so these sorts of things happen. Will Levis is walking around the Combine. I was in Indianapolis. We spoke to all these guys. I want the best for all of them. I listened to a lot of the hype around Will Levis, and I know you have the Justin Herberts out there. I know you have the Josh Allens out there, the ones that don't go to New York City, don't ever hoist a Heisman Trophy in college, but then they are something in the pros that they weren't in college, and I know we have that. I also know on the other side of that fence, we have far more examples of guys where the NFL overthought the room, and there was game tape just staring you in the face, and you ignored it, and you got burned by it. And the other thing about being projected so high, obviously, is you go high, chances are you're getting drafted by a bad team that doesn't have quarterback depth and probably don't have a lot of supporting pieces around you, so you're going to be asked to be the savior of a franchise. Is Will Levis ready to be the savior of a franchise right now? Is Anthony Richardson prepared to be the savior of a franchise? Those guys couldn't save Kentucky and Florida football last year. So you're about to be a professional. You got to critique on a little bit harsher scale. I'm not saying they're bad players. I'm saying when you get drafted top 10, you better be above that barometer of just good. You don't draft good. You draft game changer, transcendent franchise players with your top 10 picks. Bryce Young, predictably, a lot of the talk was about his size and about his height, and I don't ever think it's mattered less than it does in today's game, although it still matters. Bryce Young is who he is. C.J. Stroud is who he is. I don't think there's a lot of mystery around those guys. I think it'll just come down to personal preference. Some sleepers that I saw, a couple of them I wanted to talk about. One of them is Diane Henley, who is the linebacker out of Washington State. And I know if you're honest with yourselves, you probably didn't watch a lot of him this year. Unless you're on the West Coast, or unless your team happened to play against Washington State, or maybe you're a Washington State fan. You probably didn't see a lot of him. He transferred in, played all over the place. I think once upon a time he was a wide receiver and a defensive back. And so he's got really, really good twitch and athleticism about himself. But he's now in an interior defensive guy's body. And I think he's raw. Still kind of new to the position he plays. I tested pretty well. It could be that Diane Henley ends up being a guy that just jumps off of your screen in the NFL, and we get one of those rare situations where a guy's pro productivity is better than his college productivity. It does happen. Keon White is someone who stopped by our CBS Sports HQ set and sat down with us for a little while. And he is such a poster child out of Georgia Tech, such a poster child for what makes recruiting and evaluation an inexact science. So imagine this. Imagine you are Steve Wiltfong back in the day, and Keon is coming out of high school, and he's 220 pounds, and he's a tight end, and he commits to Old Dominion. He's a 2-star player. Now he's being mock drafted in first rounds in some mock drafts. What is that? Is that a bust? Is that a whiff? Barton Simmons over here back in the day, is that a whiff? Did those guys just whiff? No. I told you his height and weight there, especially the weight I want you to pay attention to. 220, 225 coming out of high school, 2-star tight end. You know what he is now? He's a 285-pound edge rusher. That's what he is now. No one out there has the ability, no one possesses a formula that allows you to project a guy who's just going to gain 50 or 60 or 70 pounds in college and flip sides of the ball and totally reinvent himself. But yet it happens. And why is that? Because some guys, believe it or not, at 17 or 18 years old are not fully physically developed. That's not even to mention the mental maturation and development that hopefully happens at the college level. And so you think the NFL draft is hard? You think that NFL general managers and scouts looking at guys with full 3, 4, and 5-year college tape, full medical evaluations, full interviews, official verified numbers, you think judging those guys is hard? Imagine having to judge them coming out of high school. Imagine trying to project where a guy like Keon White is going to go out of high school. So it's a really, really interesting draft that's coming up, and you can always say that, but I circle back to the quarterbacks, and I think to myself, some years you'll say, oh, this quarterback's really, really deep at this position, or it's not a really deep quarterback class. Guys that just randomly, like Aiden O'Connell, just kind of float out there beneath the surface. Hendon Hooker just floats beneath the surface. Who knows? I mean, I've got the NFL folks telling me, well, Hendon Hooker, he's got that surgery, he's a little bit older, and yet I'm a college guy, and I'm saying, oh, okay, but I've got eyes, and I watched what he did last year. And I'm thinking to myself, again, you folks may be trying to overthink the room a little bit here. And everyone's preaching to me right now at the NFL level about how you really squeeze everything you can out of that quarterback's rookie contract. Well, you draft Hendon Hooker and you get him through, 3-4 years, rookie contract. Well, he's still in his late 20s at that point. He's not washed up by any stretch of the imagination. You make the decision 4 years down the road. Not to mention, probably don't have to use a first-round draft pick to get him. So it just always befuddles me, to use a word that rarely comes out of my mouth, how as we watch our college players sort of walk towards the edge of the cliff, and the NFL folks are watching them come towards them, some of the opinions that are formed over on the NFL side just blow my mind. Those folks know what they're doing, though. So those are some things that stood out to me from a very, very full and fun-filled week at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis.
Appreciate the comments from Josh Pate. A lot of great points made there. We allowed him to talk about the quarterbacks. I like, in particular, what he talked about with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. It's kind of that double-edged sword of being drafted so high as you're asked to come in and essentially save a franchise. We'll also take into consideration what they were able to accomplish or not able to accomplish at the college level to see their ability to come in, not just be a good quarterback, but to save some of these NFL franchises who are drafting so high up. But again, he talked quarterbacks. I know you want to talk about the defense. What stood out to you about the defenders in Indy this weekend?
What stood out to me about the defenders, Emily, was how fast they were, how big and how strong they were, their ability to run and move. If you look at anything, when you talk about guys like Nolan Smith and guys like Owen Pappoe, who had real big days at the Combine, and when you look at the running numbers from the defensive line and the linebacker position, freakish guys at corner like Keely Ringo, what you see now is a culmination of college coaches who have had to adjust because of the proliferation of the RPO spread hurry up offenses. And so they have to start changing the way they play defense. You're seeing bigger, stronger, and faster guys. Guys like Nolan Smith 5 or 10 years ago may have been a linebacker, but now he's playing defensive end. In the old way, in the old Tampa 2 days, guys like Owen Pappoe might have been a strong safety and a Tampa 2 defense, but now he looks like he can be a franchise linebacker who can cover guys who can not just play in the box from A to C, sideline to sideline, dropping off of the number 3 wide receiver and covering the flats in the hook curl zone. And so when you look at those guys defensively, Emily, that's the biggest way that the game has now changed. And so what everybody is looking at now, Emily, from that standpoint, we keep talking about offensive production is down, quarterback play is down. No, defensive play is up. And if you want to beat a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you better go get guys and draft guys that can run, that can play defense on those receivers, and that are going to knock people out when they're running across the middle, and that aren't going to give guys free releases in the passing game. You need big, strong, fast, physical guys to play defense in the National Football League, and that is how you beat a guy like Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, we saw the Bucs. That was the recipe for success when they won their most previous Super Bowl. We've talked about on the show having that speed and being maybe a smaller middle linebacker because you're dropping into coverage a little bit more. But when it comes to somebody that's that up close and personal to the line of scrimmage, where's the advantage of the Nolan Smith 4.39 40 come into play?
Well, his burst off the line of scrimmage. He can remind you from an athletic standpoint if you go back to a guy like Javon Curse, who played for the Tennessee Titans, who was one of the first guys that made the transition from linebacker to put his hand in the dirt. And it caused people tons of problems in trying to defend him in the passing game. An offensive tackle is going to have a lot of issues staying in front of a guy that's that explosive coming off the ball when you're talking about a 4.39 40, and even his 10-yard dash times were also explosive. He's the kind of guy that can cause major matchup problems on the defense.
Also a 41.5-inch vertical. Just unreal numbers from Nolan Smith. We knew they'd be spectacular based on what we saw from him at the collegiate level. But excited to see where a lot of these guys go. It was fun to kind of watch them take a next step to the next level. But that's going to do it for our show today on this Monday. We are here every Monday and Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. So we'll see you back here Wednesday for an action-packed show. You won't want to miss it.